This is the first in a series of 3 podcasts about language development. In this first podcast, we're going to look at ideas about nature versus nurture, 20th century ideas about language development. In the next 2 podcasts, we're going to look at ideas about language development and the brain. Let's begin with Marion Whitehead. She identifies what she calls 2 big questions. The first of which is, how do we learn to understand and produce our first languages or languages? Part of the puzzle is that this all happens with an apparent speed and effortless ease. Most 4-year-old children have a vocabulary of at least 6,000 words. If you've tried to learn a second or a third language yourself when at school, you'll know that it's often quite a difficult process and can take quite a long time. Over the years, there have been quite a number of competing theories about how babies achieve so much so quickly. On one side of the argument, there are those that argue that it's all to do with biology. We're born with an inbuilt capacity with language. And on the other side, there are those that say it's all to do with the environment, that language is learned through processes such as reinforcement and imitation. This podcast presents an account of these different theories. The most generally accepted explanations of language acquisitions in the 1950s were those of the behaviourists, led by B.F. Skinner. According to Skinner, language is learned in the same way as all other behaviour, through the process of what he calls operant conditioning. This theory of language is all about reinforcement. The idea is very simple. As we learn to do something, we are rewarded for doing it correctly, and that encourages us to carry on doing it more. So as infants make sounds, they are rewarded with smiles, attention and praise when the sound they make is most similar to adult speech sounds. Parents, behaviourists argue, reward children when they speak properly and correct them when they don't. Children learn from this and so gradually learn to use language correctly. The difficulty, of course, is that it just doesn't happen this way. Subsequent research has shown that parents do not tend to correct their children when they make grammatical errors. They're more likely to be indulgent and accept the content of what is said, rather than how it is said. Even worse, an American study by Catherine Nelson showed that parents who did try and use Skinner's methods to praise correct pronunciation and discourage poor pronunciation actually restricted language acquisition. Their children had smaller vocabularies than those of children who did not use this method. Another explanation of how language is acquired is offered by social learning theory, and the key figure here is Albert Bandura. The emphasis here is on learning through imitation. Children listen and observe the speech of others and imitate how they do it. As you can see from the slide, though, there are some significant problems with a theory that says it's all about copying what you hear. For example, the way in which young children speak is often far more creative than can be explained by pure imitation. Young children's language is often grammatically incorrect. They will use phrases such as "I goed there" or "I wented," which they're unlikely to have heard from their parents. Both Bandura and Skinner emphasize the importance of the world around the child to explain the development of language. A theory which directly opposed this was proposed in the 1950s and 60s, and this emphasized the importance of biology. Noam Chomsky proposed an internal structure which he called a language acquisition device, or a LAD. The LAD provides for the infant a universal set of rules of grammar and provides a firm basis for the learning of a specific language. Babies learn language at an astonishing speed simply because they already have a biological inbuilt sense of the structure of all languages in their heads at birth. This allows them to build on this and quickly develop knowledge of a specific language. A key feature of Chomsky's argument is that children do not hear enough correct speech around them to be able to use this, as Bandura suggests, as a model for their own language. He also argues that the kind of language they hear is often grammatically quite poor and so does not give them a good basis for their own language. This is known as the poverty of stimulus argument. This feature of Chomsky's work is picked up by another and more recent nativist theorist, Steven Pinker. In his book The Language Instinct, Pinker offers a number of arguments as to why language might be innate. He refers to studies by Derek Bickerton of migrant workers in Hawaii. These workers did not have a common language and so developed what is known as a pidgin language, using bits and bobs of all the language that was spoken by the migrants, but lacking a clear set of rules or any formal grammar. The children of these workers did, according to Pinker, what all children do. They took this bitty, unformed language and reinvented it as a fully formed, proper language. Children, he argues, do not need to imitate a fully formed language. They have an inbuilt capacity that allows them to make a lot from very little. For more on Chomsky, you can have a look at Mitchell and Ziegler, and for more on Pinker, then I would recommend Oates and Grayson. In summary then, one of the big questions is how we learn to speak our first language and how we learn it so quickly. In the 20th century, Skinner and Bandura developed theories that were all based around the idea that it's the environment that helps children to develop language. In opposition to these, Chomsky and later Pinker developed theories which suggested it might be more to do with an inbuilt capacity. For more on these ideas, we would recommend our book, Child Development and the Brain.